Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube or on Rumble. However, I would like to give a shout out to the people watching this also on Rumble, because there are many people migrating to Rumble as well. And if you aren't yet registered to Rumble, I strongly advise you to register and be ready, just in case this YouTube channel or this podcast is cancelled or deplatformed by the free speech platform YouTube belonging to Google, which is an unfortunate situation that many podcasters have already faced, and many are already they are biting the dust. So be aware of that. As I was preparing this live streaming, which is mostly going to be about the US embassy and the ambassador's role in destabilizing Lebanon and helping the Israeli war machine, I also realized that there is a big fuzz and buzz on social media platforms about this incident in Iran, which I'm not sure if you are aware of it. Yesterday, a woman in Tehran in a public square walked in her underwears, and she was escorted by the police, and she has been taken to a mental health institute. I'm not sure if she is suffering from any mental disorder. I'm not going to endorse the official narrative in Iran. If you haven't followed my opinion, let's say, about this type of dress codes, for example, and laws, I'm totally against it. But it's not my country, and I don't like to intervene in other countries' affairs. And at the same time, I increasingly started to realize the hypocrisy behind these calls for women's liberation in Iran, which is mostly coming from the so-called liberals in the West, who see nothing in woman but her body. They keep telling us that um, men objectify women, and in our culture, let's say in the backward countries in the Middle East, we objectify women, but it seems that they are the ones objectifying women, and they're the ones trying to equate between someone walking in her underwear in the street with freedom. And I don't necessarily find that a freedom. There are places for people to walk nude. There are some shores, for example, here in Berlin, some lakes where you could go and people are naked. So there are special places. If you walk in Berlin in your underwear as a woman, you will be stopped by the police. That's not freedom, in my opinion. And this doesn't stop me from saying that I'm for women's right to not be unveiled. I'm not for forcing women to to wear a hijab or veil their hair or cover themselves, but I'm for modesty as well. So we can find a middle ground in this, and that is modesty. Just like normal people, you can see wearing their jeans and their pants and their shirts and t-shirts. But the so-called liberals, they take things to the extreme. And the photos of this woman is just all over social media platforms in order to try to cause some instability in Iran as well. So these people watched what happened in Palestine, in Gaza in the past year, where thousands of women have been killed. Their limbs were amputated. Basically, their bellies were dismembered. And all these crimes didn't stir their conscience nearly as much as the sight of an quote-unquote oppressed Iranian woman standing in her underwear in a public square in Tehran. So this is what women's liberation means to them. And I'm not going to be on the side of these people who claim to be championing women's rights by equating nudity or walking, let's say, in an underwear with women's empowerment. And I'm against objectifying women, and I'm against sexualizing women the way they are doing. So I'm going to find a middle ground in this. And I know for sure that these people are so dishonest that they haven't talked about women's right to live, and be alive when thousands of them have been killed, dismembered, and some of them were pregnant and they were killed and slaughtered by the Israeli occupation forces, carrying a baby in their bellies. And I haven't seen as much as noise as I see nowadays. So I will never be supportive of these groups, very dishonest groups. And this only comes at time when they want to cause certain instability in Iran, especially that Iran is going to apparently retaliate against Israel. So every time there is an important geopolitical event in the region, these people come and capitalize over the anti-government voices, let's say in Iran, for geopolitical reasons, not because they champion women rights. Because if that was the case, then they would support women's right everywhere in the Middle East. And in any way, we don't need anyone basically from the Western liberal class to teach and preach about women's rights. Like not now, not in the future, at no time. We don't want to hear their voices. This is what happened in Gaza was the last straw. Like, in Arabic we say khalas. After Gaza, we can just tell you to shut your mouths because everything that happened after October 7 in Palestine, and for decades, let's say in Palestine, I don't think they have any moral high ground to preach and teach anyone in the Middle East about human rights or women rights. This is over. So spare your teachings and spare your philosophies. Nobody in the region is going to listen to you any longer. You lost that so-called privilege and moral high ground when you didn't defend the women and children and men who were slaughtered and are still being slaughtered in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, in Somalia. I can count tens of countries. And now, because in this stream we're going to speak about the role of the US Embassy in Lebanon, I'm not going, like people think I hate the United States. I don't hate the United States. I hate their policies and I hate their meddling and nosing in other people's affairs. And it's been the United States since at least the end of World War II intervening and meddling and destabilizing, coupping, assassinating leaders, politicians, journalists, imprisoning journalists, and trying to cause instabilities in different places in order for their own geopolitical reasons and also for financial gains. And what's happening in Lebanon now is not an exception. And the American embassy in Lebanon, I'm not sure if you know the compound of the US embassy. I would like to show you the picture of the US embassy, which is in Aukar, US embassy in Lebanon. And you tell me if this is an embassy or it's a compound. Apparently, this is what they want us to believe, that this is just an embassy for diplomatic reasons or for consular reasons or any other civilian use. So it looks like a military compound to me. It looks like it's a intelligence headquarters. It looks like something that is ready for war, and it's like a spying center. So you do your calculations, right? However, we have multiple reports coming from Lebanon, one of which is from Al Akhbar newspaper. Al Akhbar newspaper is a Lebanese prominent newspaper close to the axis of resistance. And they have reported that according to their security sources, which they have many security sources in Lebanon, the US ambassador in Lebanon, her name is Lisa Johnson, is continuing her agenda to prepare Lebanon for post-Hezbollah era by mobilizing internal forces against Hezbollah while it fights the Israeli army. So she is meeting with famous politicians and journalists in Lebanon, and she's basically telling them that Israel cannot achieve everything through war. It's time for you to do your part and launch an internal uprising under the banner of enough. So enough is directed at Hezbollah, that Hezbollah has taken the country into yet another war, and the destruction and the killing in Lebanon is now, they have to blame Hezbollah for it. It's the responsibility of Hezbollah. It's not the killer who is killing the civilians. It's Hezbollah who is defending the towns in southern Lebanon. So this is the approach of the American embassy. She's also telling these pro-American politicians that the Lebanese people must show their desire to rise up and get rid of Hezbollah and return to the context that emerged after the assassination of Rafiq al-Hariri, especially since the regional, international, and field circumstances are in your favor. So for those who don't know, in 2005, Lebanon has been hit by a series of assassinations against influential, important political and journalistic figures, some of which were anti-Hezbollah and anti-Syria, and others were neutral. But the most important and famous one of them was Rafiq al-Hariri, the former prime minister of Lebanon, who was a very influential political figure, and also he was beloved by the Sunni Lebanese in Lebanon. So by assassinating him, they have caused a color revolution in the country, and they have urged tens of thousands of Lebanese to go to the streets and call for an uprising, which was called back then the Cedar Revolution. And this led to the withdrawal of the Syrian forces from Lebanon and the encirclement of, let's say, Hezbollah, or adding pressure on Hezbollah domestically on the political level. So she is drawing parallels between what happened in 2005 and today in 2024. But she says now the circumstances are in your favor. We have killed the leadership of Hezbollah, and Israel has been waging this ground offensive against Hezbollah. So you have to take this opportunity and do the bidding and do the change and start with an uprising against Hezbollah. So in this case, I already spoke about this. I'm going to show you later a video that I think that now the Lebanese people are not really in the mood for such a big uprising, let's say a violent one, or a type of an uprising that could lead into the destruction or the removal of Hezbollah from the political life of Lebanon. But they could need a trigger to do that. And I'm going to speak about that later. So this American ambassador is also, she's not only asking them to do things, she's also basically bashing them and telling them, why do you seem afraid? Hezbollah has been defeated, its leadership is destroyed, and we are with you, and the entire free world stand by your side. The free world, of course, the US, Israel, Germany, France, and these few countries. She says that those are on your side, so you have to do something. And she's also encouraging them to prepare the head of the Lebanese armed forces. So the Lebanese army has its, let's say, its head, the commander. His name is General Joseph Aoun, and she wants him to become the next president, and he has close ties with the American embassy as well. So she wants for a pro-American president to come to power in Lebanon as well. So according to this high-level Lebanese security source, Ambassador Johnson's allies are conducting incitement operations to stoke internal sectarian tensions in areas where displaced persons, mostly Shia from Beirut's southern suburbs and the south of Lebanon, are now staying after fleeing their homes due to the Israeli bombing. So what they're basically doing is they have pushed all these Lebanese Shia communities from their towns, and especially from the southern suburbs of Beirut, into other areas. And in some of these areas, they are overwhelmingly populated, let's say, by Christians. And this is the sensitivity in Lebanon, that there are some political forces, Christian political forces in Lebanon, they detest Hezbollah, right? And this has a long history. Since the civil war, they hate Muslims, basically, and especially what is called the Phalanges and the Lebanese Forces political groups. So in these areas, they are trying to create this contact between them and try to start certain clashes between the communities in Lebanon. Anyways, this source says that the ambassador has clearly stated her wish to take advantage of the current Israeli war to eliminate Hezbollah completely, not only militarily, but politically as well. Because Hezbollah has member of parliaments, it has coalitions in the government. And remember that Hezbollah gained its legitimacy in Lebanon because in every government that comes to Lebanon, they have what is called the ministerial statement. So even when the government changes and a new government comes, there is a final statement that gives Hezbollah legitimacy, which means they say that Lebanon's protection is based on an equation: the people, the army, and the resistance. So these three elements come together to protect Lebanon. And by mentioning the resistance in the ministerial, let's say, statement, final statement, or the work agenda, then they give the political legitimacy for Hezbollah to fight against Israel. So she wants to bring a pro-American president, and she wants to eliminate Hezbollah completely from the political life, which means from the parliament and from the ministries, in order to, let's say, delete or cancel this clause in the government work agenda that gives Hezbollah this legitimacy, this legal legitimacy, political legitimacy, and popular legitimacy to use armed resistance against the Israeli occupation forces. So this is the plan of the Americans. Now, if you remember, I don't know if you watched my podcast with Mahmoud Oud. He hosted me on his YouTube channel last, I think, Friday. And we've had a really good conversation together. And I have spoken in two different segments about these particular cases. I'm going to show you what I said about this role of the ambassador and who are the people going and meeting with the ambassador. Take a look. The American embassy in Lebanon is also responsible for hiring, training, and assisting the so-called civil society, the so-called these NGOs. And there has been tens or hundreds of new activists and journalists have been spawned in Lebanon in the past decade, all thanks to these USAID, NED, and Soros organizations, to prepare them for social unrest at a later stage. So in this case, the ceasefire proposal, in my opinion, is a smokescreen. They will try to trigger social unrest in Lebanon in order to force Hezbollah to fight a domestic war instead of focusing on Israel. And how would they do that? I mean, the example of the 80s and the 90s is still alive in Lebanon, the civil war and how brutal it was, right? So they need a trigger. In my opinion, they need a trigger now. And if I was in their sick psychopathic brains, that those the ones who are planning these wars in our region, I would do a series of assassinations of anti-Hezbollah figures in Lebanon, just like they did in 2005 and 2006, to encourage the people or urge them to go to the streets, and then they consider it a revolution, right, against Hezbollah. So it's easy to manufacture such social unrests and so-called color revolutions in order to achieve the military goals that they have failed on the offensive on the ground. You mentioned the U.S. ambassador, and you said that she's visiting people. Habibi, they come to her feet. They go to her feet. They go to her feet. It's not something that a conspiracy is something we don't know. They post their photos with the U.S. ambassador on social media platforms. Yeah. Famous journalists, famous politicians, NGO activists, human rights, feminism, all these cliches that you know. They all have their activists in Lebanon and big social media platforms. And they're spewing hate against Hezbollah day and night. So it's like the fifth column eating the strength of Hezbollah from within by trying to destabilize the internal situation. This is something that you don't see much in Israel, for example. The enemies of Israel cannot really come and open an embassy and start hiring people in Tel Aviv to turn them against Netanyahu or anyone else. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, but the Americans feel they are immune from these activities. I don't think that there is any other country who can blatantly intervene in other countries' affairs, officially and unofficially, through the embassy and through their CIA cutouts, the NGOs, and through the CIA itself, than the United States. I haven't seen in the recent history a country that does it so blatantly and lies about it than the US. And then after a few decades, they publish their documents because now it is classified, and then they change the classification and they publish it after 50 years or 40 years. And I'm going to tell you an example, right? And this was in the 70s and in the 80s. There was an operation called Operation Condor. And for those who don't know, Operation Condor was a clandestine operation conducted by the right-wing dictatorships of the southern cone of South America. This was between 1975 and 1983. So the participating countries included Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Uruguay, and allegedly Colombia, France, and Venezuela. So what was the goal of this? The goal was it aimed to suppress political dissent, eliminate left-wing sympathizers, neutralize opposition to military rule. And it involved intelligence operations, coups, assassinations, and extrajudicial killings. And this has all happened under our noses in Southern America or in Latin America, and it was all masked through covert operations. Nobody understood what happened there. I mean, the people who are intelligent enough to understand, they knew about it and they have spoken about it, but it has been exposed and revealed later, right? And this is the document that the CIA later released to the public. So this is the Department of State, right? And this was approved to release in 2018. So after 25, 35, 40 years, they released it to the public. And if you just try to check what they say, like the CIA has prepared the following summary of the status of Operation Condor as of March 1977, which we are passing for you for your information only. So Operation Condor is a cooperative effort by security services of Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Brazil to counter terrorism and subversion. They also called it a terrorism, just like they call all the groups, actors, and state and non-state actors fighting against their hegemony in the Middle East as terrorists. They have called them terrorists as well in Latin America. As it was first envisaged, the operation was to bring about an exchange of information among the participating services on subversive groups, but later discussions included considerations of mounting assassination operations abroad. Security services of Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay agreed to send teams to Europe. So when I say that the Americans probably would resort to a series of assassinations against pro-Hezbollah figures in Lebanon, I'm not just making up things. They do such things. They do such false flag attacks. They do such covert operations. They do assassinations in order to trigger certain sentiments in a country and urge the people to go to the streets. They know how to manufacture color revolutions. They have been masters of it. I mean, since the fall of the Soviet Union, how many times we have seen color revolutions in East European countries? And I'm not pro-Soviet, you know that, right? But I'm talking about manufacturing or engineering social unrest for certain political outcomes that serves the geopolitical interests and the financial interests of the US. And when I say the US, those are the planners, the decision makers in the US. And we're not talking about Biden, we're not talking about Obama, we're not talking about Bush or Trump. No, we're talking about the permanent state in the US. And this was something beautifully was stated by Glenn Greenwald. I just want to quote him because I really like this, that he mentioned this now since the elections or tomorrow is the big day, you know, in the US. And he published this, or he said this on one of his podcasts. He said, the United States has no functional president and has not had one for months. And it's barely noticeable and barely matters because there is a permanent unelected machine that runs the government. So even though these coups and assassinations are all under the table and covered, and they're trying to hide it from public and then publish it, these operations do not serve the interests of the American people. These operations serve these planners, the bankers, the oligarchs, the permanent state, the military-industrial complex, the Wall Street. It serves the people even in the Silicon Valley nowadays. There are people who are making profits out of these wars, right? And the people in the United States aren't really aren't bearing the fruit of these conflicts and these covert operations. And this is the unfortunate truth, that nowadays we see all this discussion now, who is going to come, Harris or Trump? I mean, if now in the US we don't have an active president, you don't have someone taking decisions, and who is taking the decisions? And if that is the case, then does it really matter if it's Trump or if it's Kamala Harris? This is a serious question. Anyways, we will see tomorrow what's going to happen in the US, and accordingly, we will decide who is going to be the next president that we're going to criticize in the next 4 years on this YouTube podcast, especially if this president continues in this, which is going to be highly likely the case, the insane interventionist and destructive policies of Washington around the world. The American embassy guys in Lebanon didn't only urge the politicians to rise against Hezbollah or start a revolution. Do you know what are they also doing? It's crazy. They are also blocking the establishment of a humanitarian air bridge between Baghdad and Beirut. So because of the war in Lebanon, there has been a new humanitarian corridor, let's say a aerial bridge between Baghdad and Lebanon. And Iraq has been sending humanitarian aid to Lebanon, and the American embassy in Beirut, they have blocked this. And they said that all these planes should land first in Jordan for inspection first, and then come to Lebanon. And if the Lebanese official airline, the Middle East Airlines, do not abide by the American dictates and orders and threats, then the American administration will impose sanctions against the Lebanese governmental or state or official airline, the Middle East Airlines. So this is how the Americans work. This is how they do business. It's bullying, it's intimidating, it's threatening, it's bulldogging, sanctions after sanctions after sanctions. So this has to change. That's why I'm making this video, for the people to be aware that this is something that is crazy. If you see how the Americans are meddling in Lebanon or the other regional countries, imagine if any other country does the same thing. You would see it 24/7 on every TV channels. Like they've been talking about the elections in Moldova and in other places. The Russian intervention is everywhere. The Russian intervention is in Georgia, and then they ask, what is your proof and evidence that there was a Russian interference? It's not my job to decide that. Like, like, what? You're the president of Georgia, and you accuse and you say that the elections were compromised and rigged, and the Russians rigged the elections, but then you don't have an evidence or a proof to prove your point. But here we have a blatant intervention in front of our eyes by the US. It doesn't even make to the headlines, except to a few websites, which I want to give a big kudos to. The Cradle. Cradle is an amazing website which have they report and cover these cases. And if you aren't following the Cradle, I would highly recommend you to do it. It's thecradle.co, not com.co. So this is one of the aspects of this. And then you have, guys, this is crazy. Like there is a mysterious road that they are building in Lebanon, and they're trying to open some route between the Mediterranean and some military barrack belonging to the Lebanese army in the north. And then we have this is crazy. I'm going to screen to you this paragraph from the Cradle. So for those who don't know, we have news coming from Lebanon 2 days ago that an Israeli commando operation happened in northern Lebanon, and 24 soldiers, Israeli soldiers, they made land in the northern Lebanese city of Bachun, and they kidnapped a civilian sea captain who Beirut says was receiving his education at a civilian institute. Under cover of night and reportedly working alongside the German Navy, the Israeli forces took the man, identified as Imad Amhaz, and escaped back to sea using speedboats. Like literally, the Israeli occupation forces sent small boats with commandos. It penetrated the Lebanese regional waters from the north, not in southern Lebanon where Hezbollah is located, and they kidnapped a Lebanese civilian captain, accusing him of being a close associate with Hezbollah. The Lebanese government and the Prime Minister Miqati, who is, by the way, pro Saudi Arabia and pro the US, he said that he was just a civilian and they kidnapped him and they took him to Israel. Where in the world something like this could happen without an outrage? I haven't seen anywhere in the world where any state or non-state actor does such operations in the neighboring country. Complete silence from the so-called international community. Israel can send commandos to your country and kidnap you, and nobody would care. So this is where we are at the current moment. And for you to know what happened in some of the details of this operation, which is crazy, it's crazy. So this is again from the Cradle. They say Israeli naval commandos conducted a raid in northern Lebanon on the November 1st, abducting one Lebanese man. Prominent journalist Hassan Alek reported for Al Mahatta. Some 25 soldiers landed Friday on the Lebanese coast in Batroun, a Christian town south of Tripoli. They raided a chalet near the beach and abducted a Lebanese man before escaping in speedboats, the report says. Alek provided surveillance camera footage from the incident showing a group of soldiers taking the abducted person with them. The abducted man has been identified as Imad Amhaz, who had been attending a month-long captain's training course at a maritime institute located in the sea. I'm going to show you the video here. So those are the soldiers, look, the commandos, and they just kidnapped the person with them. He probably had no idea if those are Israeli or... It's crazy, it's crazy. So this is the case in Lebanon, and the reporter Alek, he says that the Lebanese security forces are investigating the incident and suspect the Israeli commandos collaborated with German naval forces deployed to the Lebanese coast as part of the UN interim forces in Lebanon, UNIFIL. So there are doubts that the German naval forces deployed to the Lebanese coast, they have facilitated this operation of Israel. And by collaborating with German naval forces, the Israeli commandos could ensure that the Lebanese Navy, which is active in the region to combat smuggling to Europe, would not be able to disrupt the operation. I'm not going to comment on this. So Sevak says, Kevork Jan, my first attempt on PayPal still blocked and I feel like it will never pass because I mentioned Syrian word in my message. I apologize for the convenience caused by PayPal. Thank you for the message, Sevak. Just for the people who try to support Syriana Analysis, for example, through PayPal, if you mention the word Syria in your note or in your message, the transaction will be blocked because Syria is under sanctions. And if you mention Syria in anywhere in your transaction or in the note, then the transaction will not happen and it will not be processed. So crazy times. Speaking of Germany, guys, we have a new law, draft law now here in Germany about combating anti-Semitism. And I think it will pass the federal parliament very soon. And this is coming from the Spiegel. They say Ampel and Union agree on a resolution against anti-Semitism. So for some details, guys. I think it's important for us to read some of these details of the law for us to understand the gravity of the issue here in Germany, especially when it comes to Israel, because basically they are going to criminalize not discussing, but rather criticizing Israel, and they're going to equate it with anti-Semitism. So they say the factions of the traffic light coalition with the opposition party CDU-CSU on a joint resolution to protect Jewish life disputed. Now the agreement is there. Never again is now Jewish life in Germany protect, preserve, and strengthen. This is the title of a 4-page draft that is available to Spiegel. The text condemns all forms of anti-Semitism and calls on the federal government, the states, and municipalities to take concrete measures in the fight against hatred of Jews. Since the cruel terrorist attack of Hamas on Israel on October 7, we see hatred of Jews and Israel-related anti-Semitism in Germany at an unprecedented level, the document says. The development is due both to an increasingly open and violent anti-Semitism in right-wing extremist and Islamist milieus, as well as to relativizing, handling, and increasingly Israel-related and left anti-imperialist anti-Semitism. So according to this draft, the anti-Semitism is coming from the right-wing radicals, and secondly, the Islamists, and thirdly, the left-wing anti-imperialists. So this is very important. They have closed all the aspects or all the angles that you could criticize Israel. If you are coming from a right-wing, let's say, position and you hate Jewish people because you probably are an anti-Semite, I don't know what do they call these things nowadays, or you hate the Jews basically for them being Jew. This is a criminal offensive in Germany. Secondly, if you hate Israel or the Jewish people and you're an Islamist, this is again anti-Semitism. But thirdly, if you are coming from a left-wing anti-imperialist position, which is, in my opinion, this is a legitimate political approach and a legitimate right to criticize Israel's policies, whether it's in Gaza and whether it's in Lebanon or in Syria. If you have to have the right to criticize the expansionist policies of Israel, I have to have the right to criticize Israel's relentless bombardment and killing of children and women and men, right? But even if you're coming from this ground, that you are an anti-imperialist and you don't like to see colonialism in your region and imperialism by the US or by Israel, you are again going to be targeted under this draft law or the law. It's going to pass anyways and everyone will vote for it. So they say anti-Semitism, which parts of migrants have brought to Germany, is also explicitly mentioned. So it's crazy. Like when you compare the media and the political approach towards the migrants in 2015, when they wanted them to come, it was crazy, right? It was everything is fine, everyone is welcome, nothing is wrong. And if you say one thing is wrong, then you are spewing hate against the refugees and against the migrants, this and that. And now they are explicitly and exclusively mentioning a migrant imported, or they brought with them, basically, this anti-Semitism, according to this draft law. And it goes even crazier because it says that in recent months has highlighted the terrifying extent of anti-Semitism based on immigration from the countries of North Africa and Middle East, in which anti-Semitism and hostility to Israel are also widespread due to Islamist and anti-Israel state indoctrination. At the same time, ethnic and extreme right-wing positions are on the rise. All of this leads to a massive uncertainty among Jews in Germany. So basically, they are accusing the countries in the Middle East and North Africa of indoctrinating their people to hate the Jewish people or hate Israel. So I don't know if if this is not a generalization, then I don't know what it is. There are so many countries in the Middle East and North Africa who want to normalize relations with Israel, and they are peddling 24/7 pro-Israeli talking points, and they wish that Hezbollah would lose this battle, and Hamas would lose this battle, and Iran would lose this battle, and Syria would lose this battle, and Ansarullah would lose this battle. There are many countries, but their people, regardless of the state policy, so many people, you don't need an indoctrination. You just need to have a mobile and a conscious to see what Israel is doing in Gaza. And then if you hate against these crimes, you're the one who's going to be considered an anti-Semite. Okay. It doesn't seem really fair to me. I don't know. And the other problem is that who defines what is anti-Semitism? The Holocaust Remembrance Alliance is the one who's going to decide what is the anti-Semitism. And according to their definition, it states that, among other things, that the state of Israel, which is understood as a Jewish collective, can also be the target of anti-Semitic attacks in word and deed. So if you criticize Israel, and because Israel is considered understood as a Jewish collective, then your words and deeds are anti-Semitic. Therefore, the government will stop funding any anti-Semitic groups. For example, according to them, the boycott divestment movement is an anti-Semitic, so they will stop funding it. They will change the laws in Germany in order to for example, it could be a criminal case against you if you criticize Israel, and you could lose your right of residence in Germany, you could lose your right of asylum, and you could lose your right for nationality, basically. So they will ban the BDS organization, and they will stop funding any cultural and art events which endorse anti-Semitism. And according to them, of course, anything that could be considered nowadays anti-Semitism. And especially these movie screenings and cultural events. And in schools, they are going to impose strict laws, and they could apply house rights and exclude the pupils, the students from class, or even enrollment in schools if they're accused of anti-Semitism. See, the authors of these laws deal with Israel's war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Israel has the right under international law to defend itself against attacks contrary to international. So basically, they're saying Israel has the right to defend itself under international law, blah, 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 blah. Although the UN says that Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself on occupied territories. One of the German websites, Deutschlandfunk, says that the member of parliament and ministers and party leaders, they have been complaining in Germany in secret behind closed doors because there is a mounting pressure on them from various sides in recent months: pro-Israeli lobby organizations, Israeli embassy, the Central Council of Jews on lawyers, scientists, artists, and others. They have been pressuring them to accept this type of law. And the debate has long been toxic. The fear of being defamed by the Bild newspaper as an anti-Semite and Israel hater also works to the highest ranks in politics. So during the private talks and in confidential discussions, many members of the Bundestag also state that they have followed the work on this resolution with serious concerns, sometimes horror. They must now prove that they are still free enough to articulate their objections openly and to direct this fundamentally misguided procedure into another path. They will not be able to object it in public. They are not going to be able to do that. They will be scrutinized, they will be excluded from the discussion, they will be called names, and they will shit in their pants before they do any public statement against this law. So this is just my prediction, and I think it's the thing that is going to happen in this case as well. While we're watching this live streaming, I just want to appreciate every one of you guys, and if you can, and I think you can, please hit the like button as you're watching this live streaming. It would be a great help to me, and this content will reach to so many other people while you're watching. And when this stream is over, more people will see this stream as well. So In these recent weeks, we've seen so many rumors, psyops against Syria, trying to find cracks in the axis of resistance and say that Syria is abandoning Iran and abandoning Hezbollah, and they're going to join the American Saudi camp in the region and the UAE, this and that. And I think this is all, as I mentioned multiple times, psyops. But Muhammad Nader al-Omari, he wrote an opinion article, which I think it's amazing. He says the accusations against Damascus by Israel and the US reveal contradictory narratives, because at one hand, they continue accusing Syria of playing the role of the conduit and sending weapons to Hezbollah. And at the other hand, they task their minions in the press in the region to peddle this 24/7 propaganda against Syria, that Syria has abandoned the axis of resistance and Bashar betrayed his allies. So they have to choose and decide which one it is, because on the official level, they are exerting pressure on Damascus to abandon the axis of resistance. And on the other hand, they say Assad already did it. So which one is it? Before I just start this live streaming, Damascus has been bombed by Israel. So if Assad abandoned his allies, then why Israel is bombing Damascus, right? I think those are serious questions that nobody is answering. But this opinion article by Muhammad Nader al-Omari, he says there are several indicators that confirm Syria's firm support of the resistance against Israel's attempts to reshape West Asia, including efforts to eradicate Hezbollah in Lebanon, a goal often repeated by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, the Israeli Energy Minister, Yuval Steinitz, he recently directly threatened Bashar al-Assad, and he vowed to change the Syrian political system due to its support for the resistance. And this stance by the energy minister was backed by the ultra-nationalist minister Gideon Saar, who said, quote, Israel must make clear to Assad that if he chooses to harm Israeli security in this manner, he places his regime in danger. Now, there are multiple, in my opinion, examples for us to understand how the Syrian side supports Hezbollah in this case. And I'm going to show you this paragraph, which is important because the other day, the Israeli side and an Israeli press, they published the footage from southern Lebanon because they invade certain towns and they take photos and they publish it. And this was on October 15th interview with Le Figaro, echoed by Israeli army spokesperson Daniel Hagari. They were in southern Lebanon and they found in the 646th Reserve Parachute Brigade, they discovered state-of-the-art Russian weapons during its inspection of Hezbollah's Radwan unit bases in southern Lebanon. So they were in some military base that they occupied in southern Lebanon, and they found Russian weapons there, and those were belonging to the stockpile of Syria. And the photos published by Israeli military correspondent Doron Kadosh showed weaponry in a wooden box marked with English inscriptions indicating Russian origin that were allegedly shipped to Syria via the Tartus port. Additionally, Hezbollah used Fadi-1, Fadi-2, and Fadi-3 missiles, first showcased in a video from the Imad 4 facility, was deployed against targets in Haifa in late September. And those missiles, of course, they came from Syria. They were developed in Syria as well. And if we remember in a 2020 interview with the late Secretary General of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, he gave this interview to Al-Mayadeen. He revealed that Cornet missiles used by Hezbollah were initially purchased by Syria from Russia and transferred to Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. In addition to this, Hezbollah has Yachont anti-ship missiles since 2006. They also obtained it from Syria, which have a range of 300 kilometers. The capability to down Israeli drones has raised Israeli suspicions that the Panzer air defense systems, along with advanced Russian SA-22 systems, has also been transferred from Syria to Hezbollah. These indicators, coupled with Israel's military mobilization along the Golan Front, shifting lines of engagement, and the demands conveyed by U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein for developing international forces to monitor the Syrian-Lebanese border all reflect the predicament facing Damascus and make clear that Israel intends to expand its war to Syria. I have been speaking about this for quite some time now, and why Syria is important for the axis of resistance and why they want to expand this war to Syria. I'm happy to see more journalists and authors are joining this prediction, because they will not tolerate a Syrian state and Syrian state-sponsored support to Hezbollah, and then Hezbollah delivers this support to the Palestinian groups. They're not going to tolerate that. So this war, in my opinion, it's going to be a long war. It's going to be a very brutal war. It's going to be a dirty war, and they're going to continue in this. And I'm not going to give predictions what is going to be the outcome of this conflict, but I have my subjective opinion is it that it's a very, very difficult task for them, for the Americans to do. And they will be faced with an immense resistance, both popular and military. So, I mean, nobody should expect anything less than such confrontation or such wars from the US and Israel. But at the same time, no one should underestimate the strength of the other side, the anti-American players in the region. And we're going to see soon the retaliation of Iran, and we're going to measure according to it the might and strength of Iran. Again, in terms of deterrence, in terms of the military capacity, technological capabilities, and how much pain Iran can inflict both on the US and Israel. We will see if the Americans are going to participate in such an expanded conflict, let's say, in the region. However, they have sent their bombers in the region recently. They have sent 12 B-52s, and this was the route of the B-52s, and they have passed through, as you can see, the Mediterranean, and they are heading to Qatar. And this is something that is quite important, because these bombers, basically, they landed in Qatar, and Americans B-52 strategic bombers are heading to Qatar's Al Udeid air base. Qatar will keep them grounding, or there will be no liquefied natural gas to export. I mean, this is something that is very important in the context of this conflict in the region. Qatar is always represents itself as if it is some sort of a neutral player, and Al Jazeera presents itself as if it is a pro-axis of resistance. They're not. They're a big psyop. I have been mentioning this for a long time. If there is anyone with two functioning brain cells who believes that Qatar has one of the biggest American military bases, and the US can send these strategic bombers there anytime they want to attack their enemies in the region, if these people believe that there is also few kilometers away from this military base, because Qatar is this size, right? If anyone believes that Al Jazeera is established there to be an anti-American outlet or anti-Israeli outlet, then I think this person has completely lost it. And Turkey is the same thing. They keep talking and talking, and basically Erdogan barking against Israel, and then he sends the fuel and the gas of Azerbaijan to Israel. They're financing the war machine of and facilitating the war machine of Israel. But at the same time, they present themselves as some sort of liberators, and they know what the Arabic people and Muslim people like to hear. They like sentimental speeches. They like excitement. They like, they're just playing with their emotions, basically. This is the unfortunate truth. Whereas the countries which supported the Palestinians with tangible support, they're the ones demonized by Al Jazeera, by Al Arabiya, by American-funded, Saudi-funded, and Qatari-funded outlets in the region, right? This is the bitter truth. So I truly see the role of Qatar is it's a fifth column, in the region, and people unfortunately fall for it over and over and over and over again. Anyways, I'm already in the last part of this live streaming. I appreciate every single one of you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into today's live streaming. Before leaving this stream, I would really appreciate it more if you could hit the like button. I'm going to do another live streaming tomorrow, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Central European time. I think it would be 11 a.m. Eastern American time. If you like this content, you can also become a patron and support this channel. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you tomorrow, hopefully with a guest. I'm trying to do some balance, like myself present some analysis and sometimes to have a guest on this channel. You also let me know which one do you like most. You like more of a conversation with a guest, or you liking also me a solo explaining things to you? That would be really appreciating. I would be appreciating because I would like to also know which one do you prefer. Right. So thank you so much, guys. God bless you. Peace be upon you. Salam.